Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Terry. I'm 35 years old and, on paper, I've made it. I live in a San Francisco penthouse with a skyline view that most people would kill for. I run a thriving AI tech company, the kind that went from a scrappy startup in a rented garage to a multimillion-dollar machine that investors now clamor to throw money at. But this story? It has nothing to do with success, not the kind you can measure in stock shares or luxury square footage. This story is about betrayal, the kind that doesn't come from strangers, but from blood. From people you once would have died for. I grew up in a forgotten little town about 8 hours outside of San Francisco. Back then, life meant second-hand shoes, dollar store birthdays, and power outages during dinner. My parents were factory workers, gritty, proud, and tired all the time. We didn't have much, but I always believed we had each other. At 18, I left for college on a scholarship and swore I'd come back with something to show for all the hardship. And I did. I sent money home religiously. First a few hundred a month. Then thousands. I renovated their house, paid their bills, cleared their debts, bought my younger brother, Adam, a car. When he wanted to buy a house, I fronted the down payment without a second thought. I got him a job using my connections. Every success I had, I passed back to them, because I thought that's what family did. And deep down, a part of me still longed for their approval, their pride. I wanted to be seen. Not just as the ATM or the older brother who made it, but as Terry. As their son. As their brother. So, when my mom's 65th birthday was coming up, I decided to do something special. Work had been intense, I had just closed a major Asian expansion deal, but I cleared my calendar. I planned to surprise her. Not just with a visit, but with something from the heart, a buttercream cake I baked myself, and a pearl-studded gold necklace I'd had custom-made. I left San Francisco at dawn. The sky was already turning gray when I hit the highway. By the time I was halfway there, the rain had started. No, poured. The kind of storm that claws at your windshield and turns the road into a slip and slide. But I kept driving. I kept driving because in my mind, I saw her face when she opened the door. The shock. The smile. The hug. I imagined Adam cracking a joke. My dad slapping my back like he always did when he was proud of me. I imagined warmth. But that's not what I found. I pulled into town around 9 p.m., soaked and exhausted, the cake still somehow intact on the passenger seat. Their house glowed with warm light, and I could hear laughter drifting through the windows. It was perfect. I'd sneak in through the back, light the candles, then walk in like a movie scene. The back door was still unlocked, just like when I was a kid. I stepped into the dark kitchen, careful not to make a sound. I placed the cake on the table, fixed the candles, and tied a little red ribbon around the necklace box. Then I heard it. Voices. My dad, my mom, and Adam. At first, it was just low murmuring. But then something in my mother's voice made me stop. It wasn't joyful. It was, calculating. If something happens to Terry, she said, followed by silence. Then my father's gravelly voice cut in, all that money, the house, the company, it'd be ours. That wouldn't be such a bad thing, would it? I froze. Surely I had misheard. But then Adam's voice came, and it twisted the knife deeper. He doesn't even realize how much he's worth. He thinks I'm just happy with a handout. But if he were gone, I'd be the one holding the keys to the empire. I can't even describe what I felt in that moment. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something worse, like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. I was standing there, soaking wet, with a cake I'd baked and a necklace I'd carefully wrapped in red satin, and they were sitting in the next room plotting how life would be better if I just disappeared. My family. The same people I had fought so hard to lift up. The same people I had stayed up nights working for. The same people who were laughing just minutes ago while I stood outside in the storm thinking I was coming home. I didn't say a word. I didn't storm in. I didn't confront them. I just stood there in the kitchen, watching the candles flicker on the cake I'd made, and I turned the lighter off. I left the cake and the gift sitting right there, perfect and untouched, and I walked out the back door without a sound. Back into the storm. Back into the dark. I drove aimlessly until I found a dingy motel off the highway. The kind where the sheets smell like bleach and the walls are too thin. I sat on the bed and stared at the ceiling while the storm outside pounded against the windows like it knew what had happened inside me. And when my phone lit up with a message from my mom, "Be careful on the roads. We haven't heard from you. Hope everything's okay." I laughed. I laughed until I felt sick. Because the only thing more painful than betrayal, is betrayal wrapped in fake concern. I didn't reply. I didn't sleep. All I could do was lie there, eyes open, and remember. Not the betrayal, but the history. The roots. The boiled potatoes. The nights my dad snapped because I asked for more food. The way my mother always gave Adam more, even when I was the one going hungry. The way no one celebrated when I got my scholarship. The way they only started calling when I had money to send. All of it, the signs, had been there. I just refused to see them. Because we don't want to believe the people we love are capable of using us. Of wishing us gone. But that night, in a cheap motel with rain pounding against cracked windows, I faced the truth. They didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. And I had risked everything, my life, my health, my joy, for people who didn't even see me as human. Only as inheritance waiting to be triggered. That's when something inside me shifted. Not rage. Not revenge. Not yet. Just, resolve. Resolve that I would never be the same again. They wanted a world without me. Let's see how they survive it, without the man they thought was a fool. I didn't drive straight back to San Francisco. I couldn't. I didn't even know who I was in that moment, much less where I wanted to go. The person who had left his luxury penthouse at 5 a.m. with a homemade cake and a heart full of hope, that person had died somewhere between the candlelight in the kitchen and the lies in the living room. Instead, I drove with no direction. Just roads. Empty highways soaked in rain. I don't even remember checking into the motel. I handed over my credit card, mumbled something about a long drive, and staggered into a room with flickering lights and cigarette burns on the carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours. I didn't cry, not yet. I just stared at the floor, at the cracks in the paint, and let the silence crawl over me like a shroud. The storm outside had quieted, but in my chest, a hurricane was still ripping through every memory, every sacrifice, every stupid moment I had believed I was part of a family. And then, the tears came. Not the soft, movie scene kind of crying. No, this was ugly. Gut-wrenching. I was sobbing into my hands like a child, rocking back and forth, whispering the same question over and over. Why? Why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't they just love me? Why did I keep trying when the signs were always there? I thought about the nights I went without sleep, building the company from scratch, eating ramen so I could send more money home. I remembered walking into Adam's apartment and seeing the giant OLED TV, the imported whiskey, the designer shoes. All things he bought with my money. And not once, did he ever say thank you. He acted like it was his birthright. My mother would call me once a month, but it was always about money. Always. The roof's leaking again. Your father's car needs repairs. Adam wants to start a business. They never asked how I was doing. Never asked if I needed anything. And I gave. God help me, I gave them everything I had. Because deep down, I was still that little boy desperate for approval. The one who thought if he just gave enough, they'd love him back. That night, I relived every memory I had buried. Every moment I thought was normal, but wasn't. Like how my father would always call me useless if I brought home anything less than an A. Or how my mom would cut Adam's portion bigger at dinner, saying, "He's the baby, he needs more." Even though I was starving. Even the day I left for college, my father's words were a slap: "Don't come back until you're rich." Not, "We're proud of you." Not, "We'll miss you." Just, "Bring us something when you're worth something." And I did. I brought them everything. But it was never me they wanted. Only the rewards of what I could become. In the motel room, as dawn broke through the dirty curtains, I stared into the cracked mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes were bloodshot, cheeks hollow, jaw clenched. I looked like a man who'd been mugged. But worse, because the thieves didn't come from a dark alley. They came from my own home. That's the thing about family. When they betray you, it cuts deeper than any blade. Because they know where to slice. They know your soft spots. They know your heart. And they exploit it. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A message from my mother. "Where are you? You didn't even say hi. We saw the cake and necklace. Why would you leave without seeing us?" I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to reply. To scream. To call out the lies. To say, "I heard everything." But I didn't. I knew what they'd do. They'd deny it. Gaslight me. Turn it around like I was being dramatic. Like I was selfish for holding on to one little conversation. So I just turned the phone face down. I needed to breathe. I needed clarity. And there was only one person who'd ever offered me that growing up. Aunt Sharon. My mother's older sister. She lived just outside town, on a modest plot of land surrounded by wild grass and creaky fences. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year, but as a child, her home was my only real refuge. When my parents fought. When my dad hit the bottle. When I got too many bruises to lie about. She made me hot cocoa and read me old mystery novels. She listened. She never asked for anything. She just loved me. So I drove to her. Through gray skies and fog, through the echo of heartbreak, I drove to the only place that had ever felt safe. When I pulled into her driveway, she was in the garden. She looked up and squinted, then froze. "Terry," she called, her voice breaking. I nodded, stepping out of the car, and in that moment, just one look at her face, I broke again. I ran to her and collapsed into her arms, and like I was 8 years old again, she held me. Tight. Without judgment. Without questions. Only warmth. Inside, over cups of tea that steamed and porcelain cups chipped at the edges, I told her everything. The drive. The cake. The gift. The laughter in the living room. The words I heard through the kitchen wall. My mother. My father. Adam. Every word. When I was done, she didn't speak right away. She set down her cup, took my hand in hers, and looked at me, not with pity, but with clarity. "Terry," she said softly, "I've always known they were broken inside. Your mother, she was selfish as a girl. She took and took, even from me. Your father followed whatever made life easier. And Adam, well, he grew up watching them worship money more than morals." I nodded slowly. I just didn't want to believe it. "I know," she said. "Because you're not like them. You love. You hope. But that doesn't mean you have to let them destroy you." A tear slipped down my cheek. "What do I do now, Aunt Sharon?" She squeezed my hand. "You live, Terry. But for you. Not them. You stop giving them your power. You stop bleeding for people who sharpen the knives behind your back. Her words hit like thunder. They weren't just advice. They were the first bricks in a new foundation. I spent that night at her house, curled up in the guest room surrounded by the smell of old books and wood polish. For the first time in days, I slept. Not deeply. Not dreamlessly. But I slept knowing one thing with absolute clarity. They would never get another piece of me. The next morning brought stillness. Not peace, peace was still far off, but stillness. The kind that comes after a hurricane, when the sky is strangely blue and the air feels too quiet. I woke in Aunt Sharon's guest room to the scent of frying eggs and fresh coffee, and for a moment, I could almost pretend I was a kid again. Before money. Before betrayal. Before I knew what it meant to be used by your own blood. I shuffled into the kitchen, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and found Aunt Sharon humming a gospel song while plating breakfast. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just handed me a plate and said, "Eat." It was the first real meal I'd had in over a day. We ate in silence for a while before she finally said, "You're not done with them." I looked up. "I mean," she clarified, "you're cutting them off, but you're not done. I see it in your face. Something in you wants justice. Not just closure." I didn't deny it. I didn't even pretend to be noble. I nodded. "I gave them my life," I said quietly. "And they waited for me to die." Aunt Sharon sipped her coffee. "Then maybe it's time they find out what life looks like without you." That's when the idea started. Like a splinter in the back of my mind, slowly working its way to the surface. I had the power now. They just didn't know it. But I wasn't ready to strike yet. Not before I understood the full picture. I needed answers. I needed to know why they were so sure they could take over everything if something happened to me. Something wasn't adding up. And then I remembered something. A year ago, I had a lawyer draft an early version of my will. Not because I was sick or anything, just responsible planning. I didn't think twice when I named my parents and Adam as the primary beneficiaries. They were family. Who else would I leave it to? But here's the kicker, I'd never actually finalized or signed the will. It was sitting in a drawer at my office. Drafted. Unexecuted. Completely void. If they thought my assets would automatically go to them, they were wrong. That revelation hit me like a cold wave. They were banking on something that wasn't real. And that's when I realized just how deep their greed ran. They hadn't just wished for my death. They had assumed control. They were already treating it like a done deal. But it wasn't. They had no idea how vulnerable they really were. And I was going to keep it that way. I drove back to San Francisco that night, not because I was done grieving, but because I had work to do. Real work. Not for them. For me. The penthouse felt different now. Colder, maybe. But also clearer. Like walking into a battlefield instead of a shrine. I pulled out the will draft from my locked filing cabinet and stared at the names, beneficiaries, Ellen Blake, mother, Gerald Blake, father, Adam Blake, brother. I sat there, letting those names burn into my vision. Then I tore the document in half. That night, I called my attorney and scheduled a meeting. "New will," I said. "New instructions. Everything." "Want to name new beneficiaries?" he asked. I paused. "Yes. I want full control. And I want them out." "Got it." But that wasn't the real twist. The real twist came 2 days later. While reviewing my personal expense reports with my financial advisor, something odd popped up. Multiple charges, strange ones. Expensive dinners. Designer clothing. Even a deposit on a condo rental. But none of them had my name on them. They were all listed under Adam's access card. See, a year ago, I'd given Adam a company card, just for emergencies. And maybe the occasional dinner with a client. But this? This was theft. Subtle, sneaky, and spread out over months so I wouldn't notice. When I called him about it, his tone was classic deflection. "Oh come on, Terry," he said, laughing like it was no big deal. "You make millions. What's a few grand here and there?" "A few grand?" I repeated. "You've spent over $40,000 in 6 months." He paused. Then his voice turned cold. "You're my brother. Family shares." That sentence. That one sentence was the final nail in the coffin. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't plot. Family doesn't wait for you to die. But Adam did all 3. And now I had the paper trail. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up plotting every detail. Every move. Every consequence. Because I was done mourning. It was time to act. I didn't rush into it. That was the old me, the guy who reacted out of emotion, who still hoped maybe deep down his family could change. But this wasn't about hope anymore. This was about precision. About turning the same tools they used to hurt me, secrecy, manipulation, greed, against them. Only this time, I'd be the one pulling the strings. I sat in my penthouse that night, laptop open, notes spread across the table, soft music playing in the background while I mapped out the revenge they never saw coming. Not vengeance in fire and screaming. No. This would be clean. Controlled. Surgical. The first step. Cut the flow. I contacted my company's accountant and said, "Stop all direct deposits to the Blake household, effective immediately." She hesitated. "But, Terry, those payments have been going out for years." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Then I added, "Also, shut down the company card I gave Adam. Flag all charges over the past year. We're filing for reimbursement." That one felt especially good. The second step. Create a new will. One that would secure everything I built, not for those who betrayed me, but for causes that mattered. I sat down with my attorney the next day. "I want my assets divided 3 ways, I said. A trust for educational scholarships, one for underprivileged children in tech, and one for Aunt Sharon." His eyebrows rose. "Not your family?" "They're not my family anymore." The documents were signed that same week. Final. Legal. Ironclad. It was strange how cathartic that moment felt. Like I wasn't just cutting legal ties, I was burning the invisible chains I'd worn since childhood. Every signature was a swing of an axe. Every clause, a declaration of independence. The third step. Expose them, without ever lifting a finger. See, I knew exactly what they'd do once the money stopped. They'd call. They'd beg. And when I didn't give in, they'd escalate. They'd play the victim. And I would let them. Because when you give people enough rope, they hang themselves. Sure enough, 2 weeks after the payment stopped, the calls started. First, from my mother. "Terry, darling, did the bank mess up? We didn't get the transfer this month." Then the texts. "Your dad has a doctor's appointment. We can't afford the medicine without your help." I didn't reply. They escalated fast. "We gave you everything. This is how you repay us." And finally, from Adam. "Bro, I'm really in a bind. Just a couple grand to hold me over. You owe me. I owe you. You stole from me." That's when I laid the next trap. I called a contact at the bank where Adam worked. A favor. Strictly confidential. "Just tell me, off the record, is he stable? Financially?" The guy laughed under his breath. "Adam Blake? That guy's one bounced payment away from default. He just took out a personal loan with ridiculous interest. Don't know what he's doing with the money, but it's not on rent." I smiled. Everything was falling into place. The next week, I got a call from Aunt Sharon. "Your mom's been going around the neighborhood crying," she said. "Telling people you cut her off. That you're some rich snob who forgot where he came from." "She's right about one thing," I said. "I did forget where I came from. Because I'm not going back there." Aunt Sharon chuckled. "I just thought you should know," she said. "But don't feel guilty. Everyone in town knows what you've done for them. You were their entire lifeline. Now they have to swim on their own." I hung up the phone and exhaled deeply. The stage was set. All that was left was the final push, something public. Something undeniable. And that moment came sooner than I thought. 3 weeks later, I was in the middle of presenting an expansion strategy to key investors. The conference room was filled with sharp suits and sharper minds. Charts glowed on the screen behind me. I was in my element, confident, focused, respected. Until the door opened. Lisa, my assistant, stepped in, pale. "Terry," she whispered, "your parents, they're in the lobby. Causing a scene." I froze. My body tensed. My pulse spiked. But I didn't show it. "Pause the meeting for 10 minutes, I said calmly. "I'll be right back." The elevator ride down was slow. Agonizingly so. But when the doors opened, there they were. My father was red-faced, shouting at the front desk. My mother had tears streaming down her cheeks. Adam stood off to the side, arms folded, his expression smug. "He's in there acting like a king," my dad roared. "While we starve." "I'm his mother," she cried. "I raised him and now he treats us like garbage." Employees were gathering. Some had phones out, recording. Clients were staring. My reputation, the empire I had built, was at risk. But I didn't panic. Instead, I walked out slowly, with steel in my spine and a calmness I had earned. "Mom. Dad. Adam," I said. "Let's talk." In front of everyone. They turned. And I let the trap spring shut. "Lisa," I called, "bring the file." A moment later, she returned with a thick folder. I opened it. "Here are the bank records showing I sent you $10,000 a month for 5 years, I said to my parents. "That's $600,000. Plus the house I paid for. The car. The renovation. That's another $300,000. I turned to Adam. "And here are your company card charges. Designer clothes. Clubs. A $6,000 down payment on a condo in Hawaii. You used my company to pay for your lifestyle." The crowd was silent. Phones were still recording. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "I'm not your wallet anymore," I said. "If you need money, get jobs. If you want sympathy, find someone else to lie to. If you ever show up here again, I'll file for a restraining order. And I'll win." My father sneered. "You think you're better than us?" "No," I said. "I know I am." And then I turned, walked back into the elevator, and rode back to the top floor, never once looking back. They never saw it coming. They never expected the weak, obedient son to fight back. But I had. And I wasn't finished yet. The lobby confrontation changed everything. Not for me, I had already made peace with cutting them off. But for them? That public exposure. It shattered their facade. No more playing the humble, heartbroken parents. No more pretending their son had abandoned them for greed. Now the entire city, clients, employees, even strangers online, knew the truth. And I made sure of it. I sent out a brief internal memo to the company. To address the situation witnessed in the lobby, while personal matters are usually kept private, transparency is a core value of this organization. For over a decade, I supported my biological family financially, emotionally, and structurally. They have now attempted to sabotage my professional reputation for their own gain. That behavior will not be tolerated. Thank you for your understanding and continued support. The response? Overwhelming. My inbox was flooded with messages of encouragement. One employee wrote, "You're more than our CEO, you're an example of resilience." Another said, "Your story gave me the strength to cut off my own toxic family." That meant more to me than I expected. But I didn't stop there. The next phase of execution wasn't about rage, it was about severing ties in every possible direction. First, I filed a formal police report and internal investigation regarding Adam's company card misuse. I didn't press criminal charges, but I did fire him, publicly and with cause. He showed up to my building 2 days later, trying to beg. I met him outside. "Please, Terry. Don't ruin me," he said, eyes red, voice shaking. "You did that yourself," I replied coldly. "Welcome to adulthood." He tried guilt. Threats. Even tears. But it was too late. The bridge wasn't just burned. It was incinerated. Next, I called my real estate attorney and had the deed on my parents' renovated house quietly amended. Turns out, when I paid for the rebuild, the land was still under my name, something they never realized. So I sold it. Not to punish them. To protect myself. I gave them 30 days' notice, through official mail. No personal calls. No chances to scream or cry or guilt-trip me. They wanted to see how the world looked without me. I gave them front-row seats. I didn't leave them homeless. I arranged for a modest rental apartment across town, covering the first 3 months. After that, they were on their own. It was the most humane boundary I could draw. But make no mistake, it was a boundary. And then came the last piece. The insurance policy. It had been something I tucked away years ago, one of those, just-in-case, safety nets. A life insurance policy tied to the company, listing my family as emergency contacts and beneficiaries. I had forgotten about it until my new will brought it to mind. I called the provider, requested full removal, and had the names changed to the charity I now supported. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about making sure not a single penny of my legacy would ever fall into their hands. And with that, every legal, emotional, financial, and personal tie was cut. I thought it might feel cold. Instead, it felt peaceful. Clean. Like closing a window in a storm and finally hearing yourself breathe again. But they didn't go quietly. Of course not. My mother showed up at Aunt Sharon's house a week later, wailing and cursing like a woman possessed. "You turned him against us," she screamed. "You always hated me." Aunt Sharon stood her ground. "No," she said. "You did that all by yourself." Then she slammed the door in her face. Later that night, she called me and said, "I never thought I'd live to see your mom exposed for who she really is. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. But I'm proud of you, Terry." I thanked her. And that's when the final execution phase began, not against them, but for me. I started taking my life back. Little things at first, clearing out my contacts, changing phone numbers, removing old photos from frames. Then bigger things. I took a solo trip to Iceland. Climbed a glacier. Stood on a cliff and screamed into the wind. I took cooking classes. Started mentoring kids in underserved communities, showing them how to build apps and code their way into better lives. I even met someone. At a charity event downtown, I ran into Elise, a brilliant, sarcastic, painfully honest woman who had started a nonprofit for youth in foster care. We talked for 2 hours without checking our phones once. I hadn't felt that in years. And for once, when she asked about my family, I didn't lie. I told her the truth. She didn't flinch. Instead, she said, Sounds like you survived a fire and came out gold. Maybe I did. Maybe the execution wasn't about destroying others. Maybe it was about liberating myself. I thought it was over. I thought I had burned every bridge, built my fortress, and emerged from the fire untouchable. I was finally free, finally moving forward. My days were productive. My nights were quiet. My heart was no longer tangled in barbed wires of family guilt. But the thing about people like my parents and Adam? They don't just give up. They scheme. And one day, they tried to reverse everything. It started with a letter. A thick, cream-colored envelope arrived at my office marked, confidential, legal. My assistant brought it in with wide eyes. "It's from a law firm," she said. "Addressed directly to you." I opened it. Petition to challenge estate amendment. Filed by Ellen Blake, Gerald Blake, and Adam Blake. I froze. The letter alleged that I was mentally unfit at the time I changed my will. That I had made irrational financial decisions, and that family inheritance and obligations had been dismissed under emotional duress. They were contesting the changes I had made, trying to claw their way back in. My blood ran cold. They were accusing me of being unstable, the same man who had built a multi-million-dollar company, managed a team of engineers, and presented to global investors. They were trying to frame me as legally incompetent. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about money anymore. This was a calculated attack. A final desperate gamble to regain control. But what they didn't know. I had prepared for this. Months ago, back when I started planning everything, I hired a private investigator. Not because I suspected anything specific, but because I wanted everything documented. My mental health. I had routine evaluations from a licensed therapist filed away. Financial decisions. Every dollar was documented, approved, and audited. Every policy change. Every will amendment. All reviewed by legal counsel. But that wasn't the real twist. The real twist was what the investigator uncovered during his routine background check. Adam had taken out multiple payday loans in my name using old Social Security details from our childhood files. He had faked a power of attorney form, sloppy, unsigned, but intentional. It never made it to a bank. But the attempt alone was criminal. And there was more. My father had reached out to a former business partner of mine, a disgruntled ex-developer I had fired years ago, trying to convince him to go public with false claims about me mishandling funds. Emails. Screenshots. Proof. They weren't just attacking me from the front. They were trying to sabotage me from the shadows. So I did the only thing I could do. I fought back, with truth. My lawyer and I filed a counterpetition. Attached were my full psychiatric evaluation and cognitive screening, dated just before the will changes. A timeline of all documented financial decisions showing logical, structured reasoning. A report from the PI outlining Adam's fraudulent loan applications and my father's attempted smear campaign. And a video deposition from my therapist attesting to my mental clarity, self-awareness, and emotional soundness. But I didn't stop there. I went on the offensive. We filed a cease and desist with threat of criminal charges for identity fraud. Adam was served at his new job, one he barely held on to. My parents were notified through certified mail. Legal. Precise. Cold. The backlash? Swift. Their lawyer dropped them within a week. The judge dismissed the petition outright. But the reversal, the twist no one expected, was what came next. The story spread. Not just in my circles, but online. One of my engineers shared a LinkedIn post about the courtroom outcome, praising my strength. It went viral. CEO fights off toxic family trying to declare him mentally unfit to steal inheritance. Comments flooded in. Thousands of people who had gone through similar things, siblings stealing from them, parents gaslighting them, families weaponizing love. I became a quiet symbol of resilience in the face of familial betrayal. And suddenly, I was no longer alone. For years, I had suffered in silence. But now, strangers were sharing their own stories. And in their words, I found solidarity. I found healing. A few days later, I got a handwritten letter. It was from my mother. I didn't realize what we had done until it was too late. We just thought we were owed something. Maybe we were wrong. I hope one day you'll find a way to forgive us. No apology. No accountability. Just a weak attempt at saving face. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and never responded. Because here's the truth they never understood. You can't love someone while planning their downfall. And once that trust is broken, it can't be glued back together. I wasn't vengeful anymore. I was just done. There's a strange silence after the war ends. When the noise fades, the dust settles, and the battles are over, not because the other side surrendered, but because you walked away. Not in defeat, but in freedom. That's what I felt now. Not triumph. Not vengeance. Just peace. In the months following the court victory, my life changed, not just externally, but at the core. I no longer looked over my shoulder. No longer checked my phone expecting guilt trips or fabricated emergencies. No longer wondered if I was doing enough to earn the approval of people who never truly saw me. Because I finally understood something I should have realized long ago. Love without respect is just manipulation. I still lived in the same penthouse. The skyline view was the same. My tech company was thriving. But I was different. I no longer tried to fill the void with achievements, money, or their praise. I had finally built something they couldn't touch. A life I actually wanted to live. And I filled that life with meaning. Elise and I grew closer. We traveled to Morocco together, walked the bustling markets of Marrakesh, laughed over mint tea, and watched the sunrise in the Sahara. She wasn't just kind. She was real. Grounded. She didn't care about who I was on paper, only who I was when I let my guard down. We started a project together, combining my tech expertise with her nonprofit experience to build an app that connects at-risk youth with scholarship opportunities. Real, tangible impact. It felt good. Not flashy. Not showy. Just right. I also made more time for Aunt Sharon. I bought her a small beach house a few hours outside the city. She didn't want anything extravagant. Just a quiet place with sunlight, ocean air, and a good garden. She deserved that and more. She was the only one who had ever loved me without asking for anything in return. One day, while walking with her along the beach, she said, "You know, your mother asked me to mediate. She wants to talk." I paused. Not angry. Not shaken. Just, still. "What did you say?" I told her she should start by talking to herself. "You owe her nothing." I smiled. "That's the truth." She looked at me, her eyes kind. "You're free now, Terry." Completely. And she was right. But here's the thing about closure, it doesn't come when they apologize. It comes when you no longer need them to. A year passed. Then 2. No more letters. No more calls. They faded into the background like static. I heard Adam had lost his job again, sold the condo, and was back living in a one-bedroom apartment. My parents? Still playing victims, telling neighbors half-truths. But people knew better now. Their story didn't hold weight anymore. Truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. One morning, I sat at my desk and opened a journal Elise gave me. On the first page, she had written, "Sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. But surviving them makes you unstoppable." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I started writing. Not code. Not emails. My story. This story. And now that you've heard it, I want you to remember something. We're told blood is thicker than water. But sometimes, blood is poison. And survival means walking away from the people who gave you life, but tried to drain it from you. You are allowed to draw a line. You are allowed to say, enough. You are allowed to protect your peace, even if it means starting over. That's not betrayal. That's self-respect. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.